wanted to do this year is we kind of wanted to go through sort of the different strategies that you have to use for the different types of cases. And so when we go into a trial, we generally have a playbook that we use and that we lean on when we're preparing that case. And it all depends upon the type of case, it depends upon the type of judge, it depends upon the type of jurisdiction that you're in, and that's what makes you change your plan as you go through. And so some of these things are similar, a lot of them will be different, and we're going to be going through sort of the differences between when you have a catastrophic injury case, the things that you can do, and when you have like a no surgery type case or a minor impact type case, how you should approach that case differently. And so you'll probably notice as we go through this that my father is going to be talking a lot about the catastrophic injury cases because in his more wise years, that's what he likes to do, not surprisingly. And then I tend to get the harder cases, I'll call them, or the more fun cases, some people like to call them. And then Ibi will be jumping in and out because she generally just keeps following us around for all these cases.
That is so not true.
And despite how hard we try to get rid of her, she just doesn't seem to go away.
So not true.
And so, but this is essentially, we're going to be going through our playbook, okay? But we want to kind of start off with sort of the general philosophies that you can have and should have for all cases, regardless of the type.
Thank you. You know, I had an epiphany not too long ago. I've given hundreds of presentations like this, and when it comes to picking the jury, I'll say things like, you know, you want to have a discussion with them. It's like practicing talking to the waitress. It's talking to your kids. It's a social interaction is what you're looking for. Well, I realized I was wrong. That was all wrong. You know, and so you're the first group I'm sharing this with. And what made me realize that is I'm taking this masterclass course on hostage negotiation. You know, it's kind of weird thing I do. You know, my wife will tell you, you know, it's whatever interests me in the moment. But it hit me because of a line that they had in it was, do not try this at home. It will not work, right? And it's a set of protocols that hostage negotiators use to develop a rapport quickly, right? But a real rapport, one where you're going to talk somebody into wanting to go to jail. That's really hard, you know? But that's what it is. And the reason it doesn't work at home is because my wife and I have a history. She knows everything there is to know about me. She knows when I'm adopting a persona that may not be totally legitimate. She knows when I'm trying to manipulate her, you know? And you can call this anything you want, but ultimately I think that's what it is. And so those techniques don't work. But what is picking a jury like? Very similar to a hostage negotiation, you know? Everybody's frightened. Nobody wants to start talking about their deep, dark secrets, right? Nobody wants to be on display publicly. Their adrenaline is pumping, right? And so's yours, just not as much as theirs. And we forget that. So those skills that hostage negotiators have are perfect. Now, we have a debate going, who's the hostage? You know, because the jurors, they don't want to be there. They're there against their will. They have to stay until somebody tells them they can leave. But I don't think it really applies that they're the hostage. You know, they're actually the villain, because that's the skills we're using to get them to open up to us, right? So let's talk a little bit about those. We actually hired him, Chris Voss, to come to our firm and teach our lawyers for a day. And I was a little disappointed because there were like 5 things he taught us, right? Well, that's because that's what there are. There's 5 things you do when negotiating a release of a hostage. and they're the same every time. So let's talk a little bit about what they are. The most important thing is that I never lie to them. The negotiator never lies. You have to develop a relationship where they trust you. Isn't that what we're doing with the jury? Developing a relationship for them to trust us. There's also significant research. Here, it's okay. You must be scaring me. My mouth is drying. You know what the one thing, the one commonality of people you like have, the most important attribute that they have? Anybody have a guess? Come on, take a chance. I mean, if I could stand up here in front of all of you. That's close. It's honesty. What we're looking for are people who are honest with us. And we all know how rare that can be. But that is the number one thing you have to protect. The entire time you're in that trial, you can never be in a situation where you're the dishonest one. Now, if God smiles on you and the other side does something really stupid and gets caught in a lie, all the better. I saw Jerry Spence do this once in a trial where he's picking the jury and he goes, "You be the juror. Do you think lawyers should tell the truth?"
Yes.
This guy objects. Spence goes, "How can you object to that?" That case was over, wasn't it? Pretty much on the way at that point. The other thing we have to do, it's called active listening. I think that the hardest thing for me to get rid of was thinking of the next question when I'm talking to you. You know, have any children?
Yes.
Tell me about them.
They're wonderful. I'm a freshman in college and a sophomore in high school.
Boy, girl?
One of each.
I'm waiting for something to talk to him about. I don't have a plan with him. You know, there's certain themes that I want to deal with before I sit down, but I'm not forcing them on them. I really want to know about them. Pretty soon I'm going to talk about what they're studying, what your hopes are for them, you know. And the other thing you saw me do that you didn't see was, wonderful? See how I mirrored the last word? Was just wonderful. We will always start talking when people do that. It's called mirroring. It's verbally mirroring what they say. In order for me to build that rapport quickly, he has to know I'm interested in him. If I'm interested in him, he automatically knows that I like him, because we're not interested in people we don't like, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. So how do you feel about being on the jury today?
I was excited when I got the order.
Really? You were excited? Oh, you're messing with me. That's exactly how I would do it, too. You know, you're messing with me. That's fine. I want him to know that I'm really fine with whatever he has to say. And remember, the 40 of you behind him is who I'm also talking to, right? But when you said you were excited, actually, I would be excited too. I'd also dread it. Did you have a little of that?
Yes.
Did you have any plans on how to get off?
No, this is my first time.
So what do you think about staying?
I don't think I have a choice.
He's the hostage, right? He doesn't have a choice. You know, I've never been on a jury, and I've wondered, I would kind of resent that. that I had to sit here for a month. What about you?
I have a little bit of that, yes.
Okay. Before I sit down, if there's anything you think of that could make this a better experience for you, would you be sure to tell me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And then I just move to the next one, right? What I would suggest on this is you learn those 5 skills and you practice them. Practice them at home, even though they don't work at home. Practice them, and practice them. So it's just second nature, and you don't have to force it. You know, the thing about being truthful, how many people have heard somebody say, we're just looking for a level playing field? We just want 12 totally unbiased people. The other side will always say that. When they do, I get up and go, let me be clear about something. I'm not looking for 12 perfectly unbiased jurors. I want to win. If I could put all of my kids on this jury, I would. You know, what have I just done now? I've just won the honesty thing, because everybody knows that's true, right? You have to be that person from the outset. From the outset. Make sense? Read the book. Ready? Oh, this is mine too, isn't it?
It is.
Regardless of the case, big, small, civil, criminal, doesn't matter. Regardless of the case. How many want to win that case? You know, this really is an interactive process. And when you don't raise your hands, you hurt my feelings. We found that the most important thing we do is the closings first. Before we do anything, we have a very clear idea of what we want that closing to be, what exhibits we're going to use in that closing, the things that are important to the story. We already have it done. Now, why would we do that? You know, how many people knew they were coming to Vegas before they got here? Everybody, right? You have to know where you're going. If you have your closing done, you know where you're going. You know which story you want to tell with every single witness. And remember, it's just the story. You know the boundaries of that story. So you don't start, you know, Khail actually has a picture of a squirrel that he holds up while I'm talking to the jury. Imagine anything so rude. And what he's telling me is, you're chasing a squirrel again. Right? It's not relevant to the closing, to where we're going, to where it ends. In the closing, you're going to have your jury instructions, the ones that are important. You need to have those before you take the first deposition. You know, just reading the jury instructions that are important to your case before you do that deposition, you got 10 times the deposition. We also find that if that closing is done, the stress level, you know, you feel really good going in. You don't feel like, oh shit, I gotta do the closing, I gotta do this, you know, all the pressures that come down on you when you're doing a trial, half of them disappear when that closing is done. When I'm picking the jury, I know what are the pivotal issues that I have to talk to you about, because they're going to be up there in that closing. If you take one thing away from this, it's that. You know? Now, the problem is we're all busy. We don't want to do it. We put it off. We still find ourselves sometimes without it. Right? But we find that when we have it, the verdict is always more than we anticipated. It's that important of an issue.
Yeah, the other nice benefit of this is when you've got your closing done, you know exactly what exhibits, and you can just create a list of the things that you need to get admitted. And so you're just checking things off. It's just a checklist at this point. The other thing is, if you have a witness that's going sideways on you, You know where you have to drive it back to. You know the exact pieces of testimony you need to get, so it fits within that closing that you've already got set up. And the other nice thing is when Miss Seck comes along, shows up first day of trial, and says she wants in.
That didn't happen. But continue.
You sure?
I'm sure. Go ahead.
When that happens, we can give her the closing, and everyone is on the same page. If you have a team of 3, 4, 5 lawyers trying cases, which sometimes you do on these monster cases, you need everybody singing the same song. And if everybody has the same closing, everybody knows where we're going, everybody's on the same page. It makes it easier for Ms. Seck's prep, it makes it easier for us as we're going through the trial, and it makes it easier for the jurors. They're not stuck wondering, is that actually an issue in the case?
I'll just add that it's also a roadmap and a blueprint. So when you have people who are redundant and
Don't point at my
who are
father like
redundant,
that. Don't talk
who
about
say
my dad
things
like that.
over and over, beating a dead horse, wanting to bring a third expert to talk about what the first expert already talked about, you can tell that person, here's our closing. We've checked that box. We don't need another expert to talk about this. We don't need another witness to talk about this. We don't need to play another deposition. We're done because we've done what we said we were going to do in opening. We've completed our closing and we streamlined the case.
Yeah.
That's happened. We've done that, right?
And that's
to my credit, correct?
You've done it?
Continue, Khail.
Sometimes you take being a parent with you everywhere you go.
But yes, closing. I think
So,
it's. I think
play
it is
nice.
helpful. I think it's helpful, and I will interject only when necessary, Khail. Only to help out. Go ahead.
So, and this kind of feeds into our next point. And if you've heard us talk, we almost talk about this every single time, it's bandwidth. And what bandwidth is we're all essentially set with a certain amount of information and cognitive stress that we can deal with each day. And so jurors are no different, judges are the same, witnesses are the same, you're the same. And so when you're going through a trial, you always want to keep your bandwidth up, you always want to keep your jurors' bandwidth up when you're teaching them important things. Sometimes you want their bandwidth down, which is usually when the defense is up. If it's their turn to present a witness, sometimes you want to keep that until the afternoon, because in the afternoon, a juror's bandwidth is significantly decreased. Same thing with a judge. If you ever get a bad ruling in the afternoon, revisit it again in the morning. You'll have a completely different reaction if you're at least somewhat right. If you're completely wrong, don't be surprised if the ruling stays the same. But you want to make certain that you're preserving these things and using them effectively. And the closing, having it done in advance, does just that. You're not wasting all of your bandwidth worrying about, do I need this exhibit or don't I? You're not worrying about, do I need to call this expert or do I not? And you can actually even see, like Ibi was talking about, when the jurors have the information, you're not continuing to put on deposition after deposition saying the same thing so that they stop listening to you, because they've run out of bandwidth. Do you want to talk about scarcity?
Yes, I will. So, my wife gave me this book once, and it's a fascinating book. It was especially relevant to me as a mayor of a city because it explains poverty so well. You know, did you guys know that poor people really aren't as smart as us? Did you know that? Anybody disagree with that? Come on.
Can you say that again, Rex?
Kick my ass.
Wait, Rex, can you say that again for the other side of the room?
Poor people, they're not as smart as us. They're just not. Anybody disagree with that? Good for you. But you're wrong. The reason you're wrong is this. When you take people who are struggling economically and you bring them up to a middle-class income, their IQ goes up 10 to 15 points. 10 to 15 points. Now, why is that? When my mother was raising me and my brothers, We were on welfare. She was working as a waitress from 3 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning. And when she would come home, she had decisions to make. Does she buy Rex's gym clothes and let them turn off the water? How do I get the electric bill and take care of this? People who are struggling economically, their bandwidth is fried. They have so many decisions that the rest of us don't have. They have so many concerns that we just don't have. You know, and so as a result, if you remove those and you give them the ability to breathe and think, you literally have a different person. We're no different. When we're getting ready for trial or we're in trial, you know, we have certain rules. If I'm first chair, I do not drive. I do not order breakfast. I do not order lunch. Every single decision that somebody else can make, they take on that decision. They strip me of all the decisions that are unnecessary for the trial. The clothes I wear are picked the night before, so I'm not making that decision in the morning. Because every decision we make, it's like lifting the dumbbell. By 12 o'clock, you're done. You know, we're just on autopilot at that point. Same concept as people in poverty. You know, if we could just eliminate that constant pressure, you become much more creative, much more responsive to anything that occurs in the moment. Carol made everybody in a management position in the office read this book. And we have a common say. You know, somebody will be bitching about something, usually me, and she'll go, guard your bandwidth. You know, that's the code word in the office, guard your bandwidth. Quit wasting time on something that is meaningless, is not going to matter tomorrow, right? But the purpose of it is so that we're constantly operating at peak capacity. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of keeping in this same theme, when you're talking with jurors, the more complex of an issue you make for them, the more it's going to suck up their bandwidth. If you give them a multiple choice decision, A, B, C, D, or E, that's a lot harder and sucks up more bandwidth than a true false decision. And so when we go through and we're making our closings and we're presenting our case, everything is binary. When we present a life care plan, it is not the entire life care plan. We don't itemize each and every item of care. It's either the full number or it's not. It's a 0 or it's $5 million. They don't have to work through, well, which things are we going to give them, which things are we not? And in most cases, when there is a car crash, when there is a slip and fall, and you have liability secured, and there is harm, people at least want to take care of the person a little bit. And if you take away this option of, are we going to minorly take care of them, medium, extremely take care of them, give them the Cadillac of care, and it's just some care or no care, you're much more likely in that binary decision to get the full life care plan while also preserving their bandwidth at the same time. So you get two functions out of it, all which drive up the value of the case. And so this idea of cognitive load, it's really, it's well displayed in this chart. You can kind of see how stress has an impact on an individual's ability to think in a micro sort of view. The more bored an individual is, the lower their performance or IQ will be. The more stressed they are, the lower it will be as well. There's a perfect number that you're trying to hit, and a lot of you have probably seen this during jury selection. You'll have jurors who are in complete meltdown mode, and you ask them basic questions and they can't tell you their name. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they have so much stress being in that environment and having to do public speaking, which most people don't like doing besides lawyers, it seems, that they just can't focus on your questions. And so when you're going through your trial, you need to be looking not only at the jurors' levels of performance and stress, but also at the witnesses, also at the judges. If you have a stressed out judge because of whatever reason, maybe they got into a fight with a significant other that morning, you want to lower their stress so they can actually make the right call. If it's the end of the day and they're bored out of their mind, maybe wait till the morning when their performance is a lot better to ask for something. And that you need to be watching out with all witnesses. If you've got a defense expert that you're trying to slash and burn on, you want to increase their stress so they get into complete meltdown mode and they can't be as smart with you. And so you want to be watching these no matter what type of case that you have. So let's talk about jury selection and kind of go through sort of the strategies. Universally, every single case, we want a questionnaire. Every single time. Because when a person is filling out a questionnaire, what is their stress level as compared to when they're sitting in that box having to perform public speaking? You're more likely to get an honest answer out of a written questionnaire than you are face-to-face when they're sitting in the box. And it's quick. It gives you a lot of information, and it also organizes all of the different jurors that you have when you go into it. If anybody needs a questionnaire, we have lots of them for lots of different types of cases. You'll have an email at the end that you can shoot an email to. We're happy to send you any of our many. Okay, don't hesitate to ask on that. If you have to send an email more than once, you're not pestering us, I promise. It's just sometimes we get a little backed up. But this is kind of an example of what it looks like. Judges tend to like the questionnaires because it saves them the time of having to go through every person. What is your name? What is your occupation? What does your spouse do? Have you ever served on a jury? Some judges don't, though. Some judges thinks it takes too much time. Fight like hell for it. Me and Ibi just tried a case. It was a pedestrian in a crosswalk. And I had to ask 4 separate times before I finally got it. And on the 4th time that I asked, she literally said, "Are you crazy? I've already told you no." Mm-hmm. By the time I had calmed her stress down, she said yes, and we got the questionnaire. Because she knew I wasn't going to give up.
By that time, I was in the case. You have to be,
I will say that is
truth.
true. Don't know if it's causative, but it is true. But fight for them every time. And when you're dealing with a money judgment type case, these are the most important questions. This is the tort reform section. This is what we look to for just about everything. I mean, obviously you're looking for background information as best as you can, but these questions is how we decide. Are they, at the end of the day, are they going to be able to sign their name to a big judgment? Because that's what we need. That's what we want.
Before you move forward, I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to look carefully at these questions and how they're crafted. These are well thought out questions, and they are worded in this way for a reason. In addition to that, for the reasons that Khail has already pointed out, you have to give the jurors options. Very clear options. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Don't make it complicated. When we don't have a lot of time to go through these questionnaires, we go to specific questions and look for a specific check and a specific box. And that's because we've thought about these questions. We know when they answer it a certain way, it tells us a lot about how that jury feels. Their convictions, their principles. And if you don't put the thought into crafting these questions properly and giving them really, really clear ways to answer it, then you're not using the questionnaire properly. So I do advise that if you do want to start using these questionnaires, as you should, please look for examples, make sure they're case specific, and then we'll talk a little bit more about examples when you don't have a ton of time to go through these questionnaires. You just have a few minutes to ask the jurors questions. There are ways to phrase and craft the questions that you're going to ask the jurors to get the information that you need to deselect or select.
Yeah.